Well, in front of Levens Garth there is a field, and right in the middle of that field was an emplacement which consisted of a number of trenches and an underground bunker where the Home Guard were going to protect England from Germans who might come over Levens Bridge and through Jackie Crozel's yard at Bridge End. And the Home Guard spent many happy hours rehearsing in that field, firing off blank ammunition and running up and down with bayonets and practising. And we as lads used to jibe them, and they returned at that fun. They just had as much fun with us as we had with them. And I vividly remember having a sod throwing competition with them. They were throwing clods of earth at us and we were throwing clods of earth at them. Perhaps they were bored, but we were really entertained. And they used to invite us into the trenches and share with us what meagre things they had. It may only have been a cup of tea or a bite of a sandwich. It was interesting to note as well that they were going to stop the German panzers coming into Levens Garth with roadblocks. And on Levens Bridge, in the roadside and at Bridge End, there were huge tank traps cast in concrete, and they were going to roll them into the road to stop these German tigers when they came over the bridge. So they had a lot of enthusiasm but very little equipment. And so the Home Guard could tell many stories. I remember one Home Guard man called Bill Hogarth, who was also a character that worked at the Blue Mill in years later, got onto a bus at Backbarrow with a fixed bayonet, and the bayonet went right through the roof of the bus, and there was a human cry, and thereafter the buses had a notice in that Home Guard must not enter these buses with fixed bayonets. And the same Bill Hogarth, in the field opposite what is now Lex Garage at Backbarrow, at target practice, shot one of Dennis Bevin's pigs, shot the pig in the head. So for that weekend and the rest of the week, all the people locally had plenty of fresh meat, because Bill had shot a pig by accident.
Tell us about the war. When did you join the forces?
In 1942, when I was 18, I went to a place called Formby, near Southport. The regiment was called the Kings Regiment, and I went with my friend. We were kids together, we joined up together, and then we did 16 weeks training there. Then we moved to a place called Arnhem in Kent, near Biggin Hill, which was supposed to be guarding the aerodrome. We had rifles with nothing else, so anybody come, we couldn't have done anything because we had no ammunition. And then one day when we were in Arnhem, they came round for volunteers for a regiment called the Duke of Wellington's. You, and you. That was the volunteers. And we joined them in late 1942. And from 42 to 44, we trained, practicing for D-Day. Then one night, which happened to be the 5th of June, which we didn't know because you didn't know what day it was, because you know papers or nothing, we were told to move. Of course, move at this time of night, where are we going? To the sergeant. I said, I don't know, we just moved. So we got on the train all through the night, we were sleeping, and we were issued with ammunition. I thought, that's funny. And when we got there next morning, walked around, it was New Haven. Still didn't dream it was D-Day. And we thought it was just an exercise. We got on these boats, you see, and went out to sea, and thought, this is funny. Then we realised what's all happening, because the shells were coming our way. We were all fired that way, never towards us, you see. Now, what's going on? Then we realised it was June the 6th, it was D-Day. And half of the battalion landed on D-Day, but I landed on D1 next morning as reserve, you see. And because half of the battalion was killed, and we were reserves. And our first objective was a place called Fontenay in France. I think that's I can't pronounce a French word. And we lost most of the men there again. Now we kept moving and moving on and on and on. And because we were losing more than we were getting. Especially the officers. Because the officers had ties, collars and ties on, and we hadn't. Then all of a sudden we got issue with collars and ties, because then they didn't know who was who. Well, we knew because we knew them, but the officers always wore brown boots, and we had black boots. They had brown boots. So we all had collars and ties. Then they didn't know who was who, you see, so...
Did you still keep the black boots, though?
Oh, we did. The privates and NCOs had black boots, but the officers had brown boots. And then we carried on through places like Le Havre and Turnhout in Belgium and that many. And then we should have got to Arnhem with a paratroop. So it was so wet and muddy we couldn't move. This is why Arnhem was a failure, because we couldn't get there in time. But when we got there, we went over the Remagen Bridge, and we were there about 3 months guarding the bridge, which was very easy because with no casualties hardly, you see. Only when we went out, we got the trouble.
Can you tell us about any of your war experiences for the Second World War?
Well, I suppose it all started when I joined the Home Guard. I was in there for about 12 months, and we used to guard the Thelmere Lake in case there was anything sort of landing on there. Nothing ever did, but it was good fun. We only had one rifle, I think, and one round of ammunition. That was all the weapons we had, so it's been rather a thin dough if we had been attacked. But we did that for quite some time, and alternate had 2 nights a week with that. The other night was training and on duty in the drill hall. We had some old First World War sergeant and a sergeant major, and we really learnt the basics of army life, which made it very easy when the General Army sent for me, and I went to work in it, had my examination. It was A1, so I found myself in the Royal Corps of Signals. Did my training in Wales, moved down to Devon. I was in the Devon Southern Command for quite some time during the Plymouth and the big air raids down there, which was quite something. And then I was moved into Scotland, preparing for overseas. And after 3 months there, we found myself on a troop ship headed for Algiers in Africa. And I was there until after the North African War and campaign was over. I remember being in Tunis for the Grand March Past. And then, of course, there's a preparation for Italy, and I was on the Taranto landings and spent the next 20 months in Italy during the entire proceedings there, on the Adriatic side mostly. Quite a lot of fun there, as well as the other sort. I remember Christmas time, the first Christmas, we were in a olive grove, and I got hold of a chicken. I thought, now we'll fatten this up for Christmas. Well, we got it fattened up, but we got too much attached to it, and we couldn't do anything with it when the time came. That was just by the way, just to show that it wasn't all the tough stuff. It was a lot of fun if you like to make it that way. Anyhow, we proceeded from there right through Italy until the end of the war, visiting various places: Venice, Florence, Rome, Vesuvius. I went up to the top of Vesuvius, incidentally. Generally speaking, it was a funny life. I was never in a bed for 3 years, incidentally. So when the war ended and I found myself in Austria, in a private house with a veranda, etc., etc., and a real bed, Jack couldn't sleep at all.